everyone. My name is Ian Robertson. Welcome to an exciting session. We've got an Indigenous meet and greet, and I'm really pleased to be joined by my co-host, Minister Murray Rankin, Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Minister, it's great to have you with us. Welcome.
Thanks so much.
I'll get Minister to introduce himself in a few minutes, but today what we wanted to cover is just talk about our local Indigenous economy. We've got three exciting businesses that are all in the Indigenous world. We'll talk about GVHA's Indigenous Business Directory, and then we'll talk about kind of our COVID recovery plans. But more importantly, we want to hear from the three businesses that we've got here today. So as I said, I'm joined by Murray Rankin, Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, also the MLA for Oak Bay Gordon Head, my MLA. Murray, it's great to have you as our MLA. But before I begin, I'd like to recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, specifically the Esquimalt Nation and Songees Nation, whose relationships to the land and harbor continue to this day. The Greater Victoria Harbour Authority is very proud to have both the Esquimalt Nation and Songees Nation on our board, and have been on our board since we were conceived, I guess you could say that, back in 2002. And we're really proud of the work we are doing. We've done some great work with a lot more work that we can do as an organization. In terms of our Constitution, we are guided by a principle and a commitment we have to First Nations, and that is to work with the Songees Nation, the Esquimalt Nation, as they pursue their cultural and economic aspirations in the harbor. So very important to us. We've been focusing as an organization, we've been focusing a lot on job training and skills development, youth shadowing job programs, placemaking initiatives like the Unity Wall at the Breakwater, and today's events around celebrating and introducing three Indigenous businesses. The idea of the Indigenous Business Directory started with us back in 2019, as we wanted to make a real effort around our own procurement of Indigenous business services, and that's kind of springboarded us into developing the Indigenous Business Directory, and again, really proud and honored to have these three as part of that directory. Today, we've got over 40 Indigenous-owned businesses listed on the directory, and today you're going to hear from three, and then over the course of a couple more sessions, you'll learn about 6 more. So with that, before we start, I'd like to again introduce Minister Rankin. Minister, a few words from you, please.
Well, thanks very much, Ian, and thanks to the GVHA for all you do. I too am speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, the Esquimalt and Songees nations. I'm here in my constituency office today, up around Shelburne and Mackenzie. I just want to say it's been a real honor to serve as the minister for a few months now, Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. And I start by saying this has been a very, very difficult and challenging time for so many during the pandemic. And yet, despite all of the difficulties that small business and large business has had over the last year, a network of Indigenous-led and owned enterprises here in the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people is thriving. And I just want to commend their entrepreneurship during these uncertain times. It's really a tribute to their tenacity. Reconciliation with Indigenous peoples is a key priority for our government. Every minister has that on his or her mandate letter, their little report cards, if you will, and we're committed to it. It means addressing wrongs for past actions, but it also means looking forward to a future where we work in partnership with Indigenous peoples to create economic opportunities and prosperity for Indigenous nations and non-Indigenous peoples alike. So I'm honored to be here and to demonstrate our commitment to ensuring there are opportunities, viable opportunities for Indigenous entrepreneurs, and to showcase the, as you said, Ian, the dynamic Indigenous businesses we have right here in our city. So with that, I think we've got a few guests we want to introduce. I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our first one.
All right, thank you very much, Minister. And for those of you that are joining us, thank you for joining us. And you can ask some questions through the chat box below, and we'll try and get to as many as we can, but it's important that we hear from the Indigenous businesses. I also want to acknowledge that we're joined by MLA Grace Lohr. MLA Lohr, it's great to have you, and we thank you for joining us today. So let's get this kicked off. It's got the pleasure of introducing Cecilia Dick. Cecilia is a member of the Songees Nation and the Cultural Tourism Supervisor with Explore Songees. It's a newly established organization that proudly delivers Indigenous cultural and hospitality experiences for residents and visitors on Lekwungen territory. Cecilia, we hope that we'll have an opportunity to welcome visitors from outside the Greater Victoria area very, very soon. But maybe to start off, if you can just tell me a little bit more about Explore Songees and what it means for you to work in sort of cultural tourism here in Victoria.
Hi, thank you for having me here today, but would you guys like me to do a welcome first before we start everything?
That would be
I
lovely.
think that would start us off great. So Asiamnis Jalacha Asa Holat Cha Asan at Lekwungen. Haichka Quantina Atla, Haichka Quantina Techel at the 8 Lanok at Lekwungen. Ait Quanas Quanana Hela, Haichka Siam. Honored guests, my name is Hulat. My English name is Cecilia Dick, and I'm from the Lekwungen territory. I'd like to welcome you to the traditional lands and territories of the Lekwungen people, and it's good to see you all here today. Haichkatsiam. Yep. So, Explore Songees is a development as a destination, management and organization that to support all of our tourism businesses. We find that tourism is a big step for our nation in ways to introduce the Lekwungen teachings to our younger generation. We are also opening up our tourism sector to, the Lekwungen people. So it's not just for the Songees people. We'd like to open it up to Esquimalt also, so that we get to share our teachings and our tradition, in the traditional areas. Within the Greater Victoria area, our ancestors have always been hosts in this territory since the time of memorial. We've had people that come from all over, from the United States, from the West Coast, from the North, and even into the interior. We had the Haida Gwais and the Gitxsan people that came here before, and we used to use a lot of our traditional foods that we used to trade. We had our camas that was here. The herring was plentiful then, and they didn't get it where they came from, so they used the herring that they used to trade here also. So there's stories everywhere that helps our people tell these great history of our people. So I'm really thankful that we get to share this now, bringing it forward to people so that they can understand better where they're located at and what we use the land for. So it's a great opportunity for the Lekwungen people for sure. So I'm really thankful for having you guys here and just learning a little bit more about the Lekwungen people. So yeah, I'm saying this is a great opportunity to showcase not only our culture, but our foods, our dancing, and our songs. That's a big opportunity because, it just gives us the opportunity to share finally and letting people see. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Cecilia. Minister, I believe you've got a next question for Cecilia.
Yeah, Cecilia, there was recently some provincial funding that was awarded to the Songees Nation to develop this Songees Indigenous Marine Trail. Came out of our economic recovery infrastructure program. Can you tell us more about how that relates to Explores Songees and your work with them?
Yeah, I'm really thankful for the ministry for giving us that funding, because it gives us that opportunity to showcase the 12 destinations tours. Songees is Indigenous Marine Trail Destination Development Project highlighted 12 significant culture sites throughout Victoria and the Lekwungen territories. We want to launch a 12-passenger landing vessel. It will create trails and sites and accessibility by sea. That's just some quick facts about the trail itself. But yeah, we would like to make our way back over to the traditional lands and territories of Pletchess, Discovery Islands, and giving people a little bit more insight of what that island means to the Lekwungen people, specifically Songees. Yeah, so this has given us that opportunity to share our side of the story. So I'm just really thankful that this gives us that chance.
Right, great.
Pletchess is it was like the last known village site before people moved into Pilatus. Pilatus is Delta Hotel, and that was the last village site before we moved to where we are located now. So yeah.
I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to go out with the Songees to the island with one of the elders who actually grew up on that island. And
oh, Joan, yeah.
Told us all about the history of growing up there. That would be so interesting to so many people who are visiting our territory to just learn that history right here on our doorstep. So I think your project is going to be a great success, Cecilia.
Oh, thank you. That's our biggest excitement, for this year. And I'm just really thankful for the ministry for allowing us to do this work.
Cecilia, I know it's tough to have a crystal ball, given that the situation that we're all in with COVID and the current travel restrictions that are in place. But, what do you hope for, or what do you hope for the summer looking like for Explore Songees, and how can local Victoria residents support your business?
That's a good question. Lucky I have my crystal ball here.
I'll borrow it after you finish. Yeah.
She never goes anywhere without it. I see that.
We have that opportunity to do a little bit of tours. Excited to be back in the harbor for this summer. Our food truck, our tours, we're going to do walking tours. Some of our artists, the local artists, will be down the causeway. We just want people to come and learn, the staycationers and, the locals. We want them to learn more about the Lekwungen people. And, I find that I always have people that would like to come and take the tours, and they're just waiting for it to open. So I'm really hopeful for Explore Songees to actually have that opportunity to get out there and showcase who we are, because we're going to be doing some displays of canoe protocol. That would be another way for people to actually learn about protocol coming into the harbor and the way that they used to do it back then. it's a little bit more history than that. It's not just them coming into the harbor. They have to announce themselves coming in and leaving the harbor because they have to learn that they are on the traditional lands and territories of the Lekwungen people. We have to, back then, it was more of a statement that they weren't coming to steal the women and children or the winter provisions. That was the way that we knew that they were coming in peace. And it was always the highways of our ancestors. So we always have to make sure that we still use that protocol when people are coming in to visit our territory, so that we know that they're coming in peace and they're going to abide by the rules of the Lekwungen people, because it was very serious back then when we knew that they were coming here. So yeah, it's just a little bit more, gives you a little bit more history of who we are and how we love to protect our lands and territories and making sure that people stayed safe here. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you very much, Cecilia.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, Cecilia, thank you. The fascinating history, and much for me to learn, and I think for all of us to learn. So thank you.
You're more than welcome to come down and take a tour.
Wow.
Walking tour. Yeah.
You can
I
count on
invite
that.
you all.
I'll definitely do it. And it sounds like a wonderful, and I think that the whole Trail Association project is going to be hugely successful and be part of our tourism beat here in Victoria. I know the non-Indigenous business community has been really supportive of this as well. It has so many benefits for all of us as we learn more about those traditions. So thank you, Cecilia.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really pleased that I could be here with you today and share a little bit of my knowledge with you, and just invite everybody out to come do a tour. Yeah.
Great. Well, I get to opportunity to introduce not one but two people now who are with a company called Ursa Creative. And the two gentlemen are Brendan DeConti and Keegan Pollard. So let me tell you a little bit about them. First, starting with Brendan, if I could. Brendan is a co-founder of Ursa Creative, and it's an Indigenous owned and operated technology company located right here in the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people. Founded in 2018, Ursa Creative works collaboratively with clients, largely Indigenous organizations, but not exclusively. And what they do is they provide professional web solutions for nonprofits, for small businesses, and social enterprises as well. Brendan's background is in program management, and he's worked in Indigenous education, capacity building, and he's worked a lot with elders over the years as well. Thanks very much for being with us, Brendan. And I want to introduce Keegan now. Keegan Pollard is the community manager at Ursa Creative. His background is in both marketing and in Indigenous nonprofits. Keegan spent some years working at the Victoria Native Friendship Center. There he assisted in work placement, job search, employment skills, schooling assistance, a number of operations of that kind. And Keegan brings that marketing and community engagement to the Ursa Creative team. So first of all, congratulations, the two of you. This is a real achievement. You've obviously you've created something pretty special. Maybe I can start with you, Brendan. How could you just tell us a little bit about how you came to work in the tech industry?
Sure, yeah. So my background is actually not really in tech. I started out working in nonprofits, I think since I was, I guess 17, I started working for my band. And then when I turned, I think 19, I started working for nonprofits, Indigenous nonprofits. And one thing I found, managing a provincial program dealing with a lot of Indigenous organizations was Indigenous nonprofits don't really have the capacity to build their technological capabilities, and they don't have time to be managing a website, and yeah, it's just difficult for them. I noticed a lot of them are behind in terms of their websites, in terms of their systems, in terms of how they can utilize technology best to um, to improve their capacity and things like that. So that's one thing I really noticed. And luckily, one of my good friends and my brother, they were in computer science. And so we sort of did this experiment where we built, a first website, and it went well. And so we just decided, okay, well, maybe this could be a business. And so during their last year of schooling, which we probably should have waited till they were out of the last year's schooling because we were super busy. Well, they were at least. But yeah, we just sort of launched this, and we're really trying to offer technology solutions. So it's one thing to have a website, but it's another thing to have tech solutions, databases, stats tracking, just to improve capacity for Indigenous nonprofits. And so there was sort of a need there that wasn't being addressed. And so I sort of said, well, we can, we luckily we just happen to have the skills to fill this need, and we just sort of jumped in, and yeah, it's been busier than we thought. So there was
Good for you.
That's a great story, Brendan. So Keegan, maybe I'll just flip this question over to you. I know that kind of giving back is really important to Ursa Creative. I mean, can you tell us more about it and why it's important to you as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, with COVID, it's been a bit more difficult than what it usually is. But we actually have a really good relationship with like the Victoria Native Friendship Center, and so even myself and Brendan, we donate a lot of time, like as mentioned, helping with a lot of the elders that would come visit at the friendship centers here in Victoria, and we would take role in doing something called Elders Tech Time. That was helped out through the elders coordinator of the Victoria Native Friendship Center, and here actually was a lot of fun. I mean, yeah, we're showing, folks of an older demographic of how to use, basic technological needs of like just, basically using an email towards, how to even here, like how to access a Zoom call or, get an, a social media account set up so they can talk to their kids or youth or grandkids. And so it kind of fulfilled through there of, working with some elders, but as well as we are trying to, get a little more involvement with even our local youth here in Victoria as well. In the works we were before the whole pandemic kind of shifted and shaped things a bit. We were hoping on doing some youth coder programs where we work with local youths and where we can help teach them some skills of basic coding, as well as getting familiarized with some coding software and just kind of show the fun of that. Because I know, for example, like our two developers, Nigel and Josh. Nigel, for example, he was someone who, at a young age kind of just had fun messing around with some code. And before you knew it, he found a passion for this that led to his schooling and education. And I know he's very adamant to, want to spark that excitement with our local youth and try to get them to maybe follow a similar path, especially with our Indigenous youth, because that is a demographic that I think could really benefit from taking some of these technological advances that are happening in today.
That's really
Yeah, I might just add on to that Indigenous youth capacity building for technology is one of our missions. It's really, there's a real gap between Indigenous youth in the technology sector, or not even youth, just Indigenous people in the technology sector. My brother, I think, was one of maybe 2 or 3 that graduated in his class, in his year, that was Indigenous for computer science. So it's something that we really want to build capacity in, because these are skilled jobs, they're good jobs, and they're going to definitely be in high need in the future. So for us, it's and then they can use that capacity to help their home communities, and sort of themselves. So that's one thing we really like to focus on.
And the outcome for this too is the stories you get out of it. Even myself, especially when working with the elders, every time there's a story you receive, sometimes it's just a room full of laughter, and sometimes a room full of tears, because there's a lot to be shared. And that's something that we do this to kind of give back to the community. But honestly, you don't have to set a price on this. Like, this is a greater outcome than what just getting a paycheck is. Like, some of these stories are amazing.
Well, I was going to say it must be incredibly rewarding because, as you said, it's there's not many Indigenous youth that are in the business that you're in. So it sounds like you guys are really doing a lot just to kind of open up those doors and to give Indigenous youth like that confidence and the possibilities that it is possible. So that's got to be really rewarding. That's really cool. No,
It
no,
is.
that's great.
It's super. And I really appreciate your work, not only with the elders, but with the youth, like, because they're the future. As you said, Brendan, there's not that many that have taken that path in computer science. And if you can stimulate interest in this new part of our economy, the sky's the limit. So thank you so much for giving back. I guess this is a question for either of you to pick up on something that Keegan was talking about, the pandemic. This has been a really tough time. It's been a tough time for every small business I know, and I suspect yours is not immune from that. So how have you met those challenges, and has it helped you grow, and how can we help to support you and local indigenous businesses generally? What would you say, either of you?
Yeah, Brent, I can start with this one if you don't mind. I mean, I'm here, and what I mean by that is I was actually hired during the midst of the pandemic back in back in late August. The thing is even though this pandemic has caused some restraints with some of our communities that we work with and some of the organizations we work with, it also has showed a lot of opportunity and possibility. It's given a lot of folks a time to take a step back and kind of look at their practices and even like their digital footprint. So a lot of folks are realizing our website isn't really up to speed. It's outdated, or maybe they don't even have a website. And that's where I find a lot of our clients are coming from, and coming through us. A lot of our business is sort of word of mouth, but folks are realizing we need to get some changes made to meet with our demographics. If they are now becoming more and more online present, we need to make sure that our online capacity meets that. And we found that this pandemic has kind of helped folks take a step back and realize that. And that's what's sort of helped us keep us busy during this entire time.
Yeah, I mean, when the pandemic started, sort of our business sort of halted. I think with the first lockdown in March, all our clients just said, this is not a priority. We're sort of halting everything, and we were a little worried. But a couple months in, business for us actually picked up, because you had so many organizations saying, well, we don't have a website, or, well, our website's, we haven't touched it in 3 years. Well, people want to access online forums. People want to connect with service providers online now. So in that sense, it was for us a really, it was an opportunity for us to get more business, but at the same time to provide services and really feel like, yes, there's a need for this. And especially with the pandemic, we were sort of just glad that we were there to be able to provide, websites, databases, whatever technology solution the company or the organization needed. Because without us, I think a lot of them would have been a little lost, because we have good relationships with a lot of the nonprofits in Victoria and now in BC because of that. So it was really rewarding for us to see, okay, well, these skills that we've developed are really needed now more than ever. So to be able to sort of give that back was really great. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I was just picking up on what you're saying, Brendan. I would guess that, maybe in the early months of COVID a year ago, people didn't know where their businesses were going to go. And that's probably why you saw businesses drop off. But then I think as businesses, it's an overused word, but as they pivoted, they realized that they had to create much more of an online presence. And that's what I think you're saying, is that's where you saw your business kind of, people re-engage with you and your business. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. As people realize, okay, online's needed to, we have, whether it's an organization that provides services and people are filling out online forms, whether it's a new website or updating that, or, being able to track things online or work remotely together, whatever it was. Yeah. We were just glad that we could provide those services, and help keep that capacity there rather than seeing it sort of just disappear.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. I'm going to introduce Jennifer in a second, but I just wanted to again remind everyone that's joining us today that you can maybe, if you've got any questions after Jennifer's finished, we'll open it up. And if you've got any questions, use the chat box, and we'll do our best to get to all the questions. And even if you've got a question for Minister Rankin, I'm sure he'd be happy to take a few questions. So I'm going to move over to Jennifer Campbell. Jennifer is the proud founder and CEO of Two Worlds Consulting. Jennifer began her career in the environmental field over 2 decades ago. Jennifer, you don't look that old, so you must have started when you were
Thanks.
very, very young. Where you worked, I know, as a project manager, government regulator, consultant. Jennifer is client and community focused and is passionate about incorporating reconciliation into each project that she's involved with. So, Jennifer, maybe you can tell us just a little bit more about Two Worlds Consulting, how you got started, the work you do, and some of the projects that you're working on right now.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me here, and thank you to Cecilia for the welcome. That was really nice. Thank you. So Two Worlds Consulting started in 2016 here in Victoria, and we've grown quite quickly, which is great. So we have about 30 team members now in Victoria, Vancouver, and Toronto. Really our focus has been on the environmental sector, but looking at the environmental sector with the lens of reconciliation and integrating social aspects of projects into our work. So we work for a variety of clients. So we work for Indigenous nations, government, and also industry, and really looking at how projects may impact communities and trying to reduce the impact and work with communities collaboratively on those projects. And we do a lot of other things too, and that's my personal area, but we also do training and planning and a lot of different types of services like that.
I'm struck, Jennifer, with your name. Not your name, Jennifer, but your name of the company. Although that's a nice name. Don't get
Thanks.
Worlds Consulting. Tell us what that means and how it infuses the services and the businesses you provide.
Sure. For us, Two Worlds Consulting is really talking about 2 different knowledge systems, which is the Western science knowledge system and the Indigenous knowledge system, and looking at projects with those 2 lenses. So what we would do, you might look at the impacts of a project on the environment, but you might be able to look at that both from the Western science perspective, incorporating things like biology and the Western kind of approaches to things. And then you can also look at how, do an Indigenous evaluation with the communities that are in the area of a project. So how might a project affect the same environment, but looking at it from a different lens. So just doing an evaluation with a different knowledge system, basically.
So basically, you would take traditional ecological knowledge as well as your traditional science-based, evidence-based impact assessment work, and you'd have the 2 knowledge systems, the 2 worlds, as you put it, both be available for the decision maker. How would you prioritize those? Would one have a different weight than the other, or is it? How does it work on the ground in a particular project?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it used to be in the old days, which was about 5 years ago. It used to be that when especially governments were asking for, a Western assessment, and then, incorporate Indigenous knowledge into that Western framework. Now there's a movement to have those 2 knowledge systems equally weighted. So looking at an evaluation that's different from the Western side and the Indigenous side. And sometimes the communities want to integrate those things, and you might weave the information together. And other times a community might think it's not appropriate to do that, and they want to do their own assessment. So there would be 2 different assessments, and the regulators would look at both those assessments, informing their decisions. So it is a really interesting time, and not to get too geeky, but in our world of environmental assessment, is really interesting. You know, figuring out how to present all that information and make it meaningful for the communities, and also present information with rigor for the regulators to look at and make their decisions based on.
That's just fascinating. It's
Yeah.
just
So just, you know, my moderating bad skills are coming out here. I need to just ask people to put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat. That's too logical for me, but obviously, yeah. So if you've got questions, put them into the Q&A, and we'll find the time to talk about that. Jennifer, we've been talking a lot about how this past year has been challenging for all of us. I mean, as you look at your business, you look ahead, what are some of the things that kind of give you hope for the future, and what do you see you're pursuing as we look ahead and kind of come out of this area, this time of COVID?
Yeah, I guess like some of the other people have said, like Keegan, I think said it. You know, we also, or maybe it was Brendan, sorry, but we also felt an immediate impact from the pandemic when it first happened, and a bunch of our work fell off. But it was a really interesting time to pivot, like you said, and to look at, you know, what kind of services can be provided still with the pandemic. And also clients at first were, you know, they were in shock, and they just went, okay, we can't be out in with other people, so we're just going to cancel everything. But then it turned out that, you know, they realized, well, this might actually last for a while, so we better figure out how to do our work. So we did a bunch of pivoting last year. We really spent the time getting our business systems in place, and really refining how we were going to deliver our work. And then I think what the exciting thing is now that things are reopening up, or even though we're at home, even though since they are like starting to build again, it's exciting because we've already spent that time, you know, really refining our processes and working on our business in a way that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do in another case. So I feel really optimistic, because I feel like this is just the launching pad, readying us to the future. And also in my particular field, we've got, and Minister Rankin would know this, new environmental assessment process provincially, and also a new federal process. So those are both getting underway now, and there's a lot more opportunity for nations to be engaged with that. So I'm excited about all of that. I think there's a lot of good things coming for the future.
That's great to hear. What I'm sensing from all of you is a sense of optimism as we kind of come out of this tough period that we've been in, as we look ahead. I've got some questions that have been popping in, and actually you got one here, Jennifer, for you. It's a question is, it's been wonderful to hear about all of your work. Jennifer, having done this work for 2 decades, how has the work changed in being able to incorporate Indigenous views?
It's changed a lot. And I worked in BC, Alberta, and for the federal government as well, like at the beginning of my career. So just thinking back, you know, in the mid 1990s, not 1990, yeah, 1990s. In that time frame, you know, it depended on what government you were in, as to what was being done. But there were, back in that time, you know, people were engaging nations by sending a letter and then not doing anything even to follow up. And it's hard to believe that was, you know, that was allowed, you know, yep, 20 years ago. And in BC, that has changed a lot. So there's more and more movement from that kind of system to, you know, how do we work together, and how are Indigenous people going to make decisions on their land and about what's allowed there. And so, yeah, huge change here. And I would like to say we also work in other jurisdictions in Canada, and they're not all like this. So there's still a ton of work to do across Canada for to empower Indigenous people to have more of a say in their land.
Oh, thanks for that, Jennifer. Cecilia, I got a question for you. Question is, how do I sign up for tours and when do they start?
Well, we do have a website, the Songees, Explore Songees. You can contact us through there, and then with the pandemic and everything, we're hoping that we won't be able to open up our walking tours. Well, there's Facebook also. You can contact us through there, and Explore Songees. You can let us know when is the opening date is. There's a booking function on there, and then we can let you know on the date that we're going to open up, because of the challenges that we have with COVID and everything.
Yep.
That we still want to make sure that everybody stays safe, and we want to make sure that the tours are small and people have space to have their 6 feet apart, and that I don't lose my voice and when I'm telling the stories. You know, because I have to make sure that everybody can hear me. So yeah, there's the function on Facebook and Explore Songees, so everybody can book through there, and I look forward to seeing people in the summertime.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, thank you, Cecilia. So Explore Songees, and people can find all the information there. That's great. Thank you. Keegan, got a question for you. It's Keegan, congrats on the new position. What do you recommend younger people do in order to advance their careers in this field?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's the thing. The path isn't always linear, you know?
Yeah.
The best thing to do is to really just kind of get involved with community. Myself, for example, like Brandon and I met each other through Camosun College. That's where we met in school. And like I have a communications background. I was studying marketing at the time. So if we're looking at me particularly, like meeting Brennan is what kind of put me and propelled me into, community within the Indigenous community. He's the one who introduced me to the Friendship Center. And, I was originally just there as a work placement, but it became like a second family, And before I knew it, I was there for 2 years before, making my advancement here with Ursa Creative. But the thing is really just kind of keeping, if you have something you're interested in, it doesn't always have to be that linear progression path towards taking it. It's okay to go and deviate off that trail and to try new things, because that's really what kind of happened to me here. And in terms of our youth, like that's what we kind of want to spark as well. We want to spark that similar inspiration by trying something that's a little bit different to let them know there's other paths that you can take to do something that you might be passionate for. So if it's, for example, if someone really loves sports, they could try doing a different job so they can have more time to actually play that sport, or maybe even take some sort of, management or project management out of that to actually even develop their own sports team to join a league. So there's different options out there, but that's kind of my take on it.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you. Jennifer, I got a question for you. Another one. What type of environmental studies is Two Worlds producing? Does this include contamination investigation, or are you speaking more about ecological reporting?
Definitely not the contaminated ones. Yeah, that's not in our wheelhouse, but it's more, we do environmental and social impact assessments. So, when a project's coming in, what might the impacts be? So before any work's done. And that's the type of work. And we do environmental studies and training around that, like the ecological pieces as well. Thanks for asking.
Good question. Yeah, because I was wondering if I'm glad the question was asked, because I was thinking around contamination and contaminated sites. And
okay.
So, thanks for that's good question, and thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, you get into the lingo of your own own discipline and forget to mention that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Also got a question here for Cecilia. Cecilia, this came from MLA Grace Lore, and MLA Lore is asking, this has been absolutely wonderful. What are you most proud to show and teach visitors about Lekwungen history and culture? And that she was a minister. She's Minister MLA Lore is looking very much forward to doing a walking tour with you. So I guess, Cecilia, what are you most proud of, and what do you believe you can teach or leave with the people that take the tours?
That's a really good question. And, I've told people in the past, every part of Victoria is exciting to share. And the 7 Signs of Lekwungen right here in Victoria has always been the best part. I'm proud of my Lekwungen territories. Each and every piece of it has history. So I love to tell these stories and giving people that understanding of who we are and what we use the land for. So there's not one specific space that national lands and territories. I find treasures in each and every one of them. It's like I can feel the history of our ancestors still coming forward every time I'm on that land. So yeah, you're more than welcome to come, and I will share a little bit more of the history when you're on the tour, because there's pictures that you guys have put in place for us that I can tell a little bit more history of, especially right down in Victoria. Right down below the Empress there's some pictures at what we know as Juggler's Pitch, but it tells a specific story of my great-grandfather and his potlatch, which was James Summit, and he was the hereditary chief of the Lekwungen people. But I'm going to leave that so you guys can come and listen to the story.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little teaser for you.
Yeah.
You don't want to give it all away at the moment.
No,
Yeah.
I know. Could you tell I was leaning in there, Cecilia? I was kind of leaning in to kind of hear the story. So
Yeah,
that's great.
You
Yeah.
come and join, and I will tell the story, and I'll show the pictures, and I'll give you more information down there. And I'm more than happy to share all of these stories with you when you're on a tour. Yeah.
After this is over, Grace, you can tell Grace Laura that I'm going to go online. We're going to book it, and we'll go as soon as we can. COVID permitting. It sounds like fun.
Yeah, come along. We'll have some fun.
Great.
Sounds great.
I'll give you some little hints about every area, and then I'll give you a little test at the end, and you can.
Oh no test. No test.
Just little language tests. Yeah, but I'm sure you guys probably already know them.
I've got a fun question for either Brendan or Keegan. Question around, where did the name Ursa come from?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because it's kind of a mystery to us too. We spent a good 2 days just trying to come up with a name, and we had every variation of our traditional languages. My brother and I are part of the Bear clan where we come from, and so every kind of bear we could think of, and somehow we came up with Ursa, which is Latin, so it has nothing to do with our our traditional language or anything. So, and then we were like, okay, well, we'll go with that. And we went with that. And we kind of look back and have thought, oh, should we change it? Should we, do something? So for us, we're kind of unsure why we chose that one exactly. It was on our list of our top 10, but we spent way too long just trying to come up with a name. And at the beginning, we were just kind of doing it part-time while schooling. So we didn't really know that it would take off into a full business. So in hindsight, we might have chose something a little more traditional, but yeah, we also didn't want to leave our third partner out, right? Name it after my brother and I. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, we always sort of joke like, yeah.
That's a fun story. That's a real fun story. We're just kind of wrapping up a little bit, but Minister, maybe I'll just, not to put you on the spot, but I will. I'm wondering, just any kind of comments, observations about, what you've heard today, and your kind of hope or advice for any of these three amazing businesses.
Well, just to stand back from it, the whole piece of reconciliation, which is a word we throw around too much without really thinking it through. Like, we need to ensure that this economic prosperity is shared by all. We all know that, and we all sort of are committed to that. But it does take a lot of hard work, and that's what I think I hear from all the participants today. I mean, they've started something in so many different areas, and there's other Indigenous businesses in our community that are prospering as well that a lot of us just don't know about. So I think we need to ensure that the non-Indigenous communities are acquainted with all the great work that's going on here. And that's, of course, why an event like this is so important, I think. But I think from our perspective, our government wants to support this work and support the interests that are represented here today. I think Jennifer made reference to the fact that our environmental assessment law is, I think, a generation different than perhaps we had before, in which laws that continue to exist in other parts of the country. This is because all parties in our legislature stood up and all supported the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. This was not a NDP or a BC Liberal or a Green initiative. This was every single member of our legislature. And so we are all, as a community, as a province, committed to this good work, but economic reconciliation is at the heart of it. And our only success is going to be when we have better outcomes for those young people that Keegan and Brendan talked about, who are learning coding and are going to now become the new entrepreneurs in that space or in any number of other spaces. That's how we're going to gauge our success. And that's what keeps me going in this job, because I think the new generation of Indigenous leaders and the new generation of kids are just inspiring. So I just wanted to say that I really support the work of the people on the call, but also just generally Indigenous enterprise is something we all should get behind. It's good for everyone.
Oh, thanks, Minister. As you were speaking, we've got maybe time for one more question, and it did come in for you. It just said, Minister Rankin, has the province considered an organization like the AIOC, I'm not familiar with that, in Alberta to support Indigenous businesses with access to capital and partnership building in support of growing the Indigenous economy?
Wow, great question.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. And I don't have time to, at this stage, to go into all of that, but we have a real commitment to, just this week, people might have seen the NBC Investment Corporation, which is $500 million that has been set aside for kind of impact investment. And Indigenous and environmental and social change is what is at the fore. And on that board will be Indigenous leaders. And that is where we hope some of that work could come from. Secondly, our Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliations has some programs, but as do other ministries. So I'd encourage people to go online and see what's available. It may not be exactly like in Alberta, but there's a suite of opportunities that are available. We have as well the work with the First Nation Financing Authority that exists in Kamloops. It's not a governmental body. It's Manny Jules and the Kamloops First Nation have generated that, and it's available for First Nations across the country to try to, kind of like the Municipal Financing Authority, right? But only applied to Indigenous enterprise. And we increasingly have the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Minister McKenna just recently announced that $1 billion is to be made available to Indigenous businesses as a priority. There's a number of things that are out there. There's exciting opportunities, and I'd encourage people to do a little Googling, and I think you'll see that there are some great programs that could be made available.
That's great. Well, thank you. So just going to close up a couple of things. First of all, if you want to learn more about these amazing Indigenous businesses and others that we're supporting, if you can just go to the gvha.ca, click on First Nations Partnerships, and that will tell you more about the broader directory and these three great businesses. I want to thank Cecilia Brendan, Keegan, Jennifer, for taking the time to come and tell us about your businesses. And of course, to my amazing co-host, Minister Rankin. Minister, I think we could probably take this show on the road, you and I. So, we'll talk later, but and then just a reminder that we've got 2 more of these sessions coming up on May the 14th and May the 28th. You can sign up at our website at gvha.ca. So I want to thank everybody and thank everyone for joining us online. And again, thanks to all for participating. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.